Hi everybody, I'm Manira Aidinwala. I have been a pediatric occupational therapist for 22 years. I worked in the US for 11 years, mostly in an early intervention program, and I also did some work in schools and clinics. I help children from birth to 10 years of age with sensory processing and motor difficulties to develop the skills that they need to move, learn, and grow through play. I also help parents help their kids through virtual consultations, virtual and land-based treatment sessions, and online training programs. I currently have an online program for parents to learn the sensory and motor fundamentals for fine motor skills and writing. And in this program, I give a step-by-step roadmap of activities to build foundational skills for fine motor skills and writing. I'm also in the process of creating a similar series to help parents develop sensory and motor skills for babies and toddlers. So if you are interested in any of this, feel free to check out my website and sign up for the waitlist or sign up for other resources. I have two Facebook groups. One is called Helping Kids Write and the other one is called Helping Sensory Kids. So today's topic is about the sensory fundamentals for feeding, and this is a topic really close to my heart as I have lived and breathed this with my son when he was a baby, so I can really feel for those of you who are going through this. I know that it really takes an emotional toll on parents and especially on mums. I hope that this discussion will help you understand your child's needs better and have some ideas to get going with. So before we start, I have a simple disclaimer. Please note that I am sharing general information and this does not replace any medical information. So please consult your doctor, consultant, or individual therapist for further advice. If you need additional support, I am available for consultations virtually or in person if you're nearby to me. So let's get started. I'm going to give you a quick outline of today's discussion so you know what to expect. Okay, so first I'm going to give an overview of some medical considerations and its impact on feeding. Second, we'll go over some emotional considerations. Third, I will talk about the physical and motor aspects to support feeding. Fourth, I will go over the sensory processing, what it is and how it relates to feeding. And lastly, I will review the sensory strategies for feeding with the whole body and with the mouth. Parts 4 and 5 of this discussion will be on video 2. Part 1, let's do an overview of the systems involved in feeding and the medical aspect of feeding. I have a mantra that I always use, and that is, it's all connected. And we're going to look at how the different systems are involved in the body and how one will have a knock-on effect on another. So my 8-year-old son has helped me to draw this diagram, and I think he did a pretty good job. It looks at the main systems we're going to explore today and how it relates to feeding. So we're going to look into the medical considerations. Then we're going to look at the physical aspects of feeding, so the motor skills, the strength, and the stamina. And then we're going to look at the sensory processing and emotional aspects of feeding. And we're going to look at how all of these skills kind of interplay to support feeding skills. For children with Down syndrome, when it comes to feeding, we always first review their medical history and how it may affect their positioning to feed and how it affects their suck, swallow and breathe coordination and the safety of their swallow, and then also about the digestion, absorption and excretion of the food. So how is the food moving through the body and breaking down and then being eliminated. So usually when we think of low muscle tone, we often think about the motor skills that children need to crawl and walk and move their tongue. However, it really also has an impact on the coordination of the body structures required for. So it will affect the mechanical aspect. I'm using this Usborne See Inside Your Body book of my son's. I think it has a really good diagram in here of eating and the systems involved. So the low muscle tone, it will impact on the mechanical aspect of the feeding. So how you're using your mouth structures to break down the food in your mouth. And then it will also affect on how the food goes down into the stomach and how the food is moved through the to the stomach and then through to the intestines and to then be eliminated. So it really impacts on the coordination of the body systems used for swallowing, digestion, motility of the food, and then to excrete the food. So if one part of the body is off, so let's say if something is off over here, then that is going to alter the functioning of the systems above. Or if something over here is being difficult, that can have an impact on what happens down below. So imagine if I squeeze this bottle, if I squeeze it down here, that will cause more pressure up above. Or if I squeeze it over here, that may cause more pressure down below. So basically it's all connected. So some of the medical things things that we consider are if the child has reflux, do they have any allergies or sensitivities to foods? Do they have any heart conditions? And how does this affect their breathing or their stamina and energy levels? Next is their breathing. Does the child breathe through their nose or do they breathe through their mouth? Because for feeding, you really have to use your mouth to manipulate the food. So if you're a mouth breather, that can make feeding more difficult because it's hard for you to breathe through your nose instead and use your mouth muscles. And then we also look at the child's core stability and if the child has the muscle strength to hold up their body and their neck and then coordinate their mouth structures to eat. And then we can also look at if the child has constipation, because then what happens in one area, so for constipation will affect what's happening up above and cause a bit of a backup or a blockage. And we also look at if the child has enough energy to cope with eating. So so this is why we always recommend that children might need to see the pediatrician, the consultant, ENT or other specialists, a dietitian or a speech and feeding therapist to look at swallow studies just to determine what is going on medically in the whole body. If you have any doubts for your child's medical status, it's really important to go with your gut instinct as a parent, because as parents, you are neurologically wired. Your neurological wiring actually changes when you become a parent so that you can look after your child and protect your child. So this is why we have this gut instinct to know what is best for our children. So that now takes us on to part 2 about emotions. Part 2, let's get into the emotional considerations for feeding. As we know, there's a really huge emotional connection to feeding. It can be pleasurable or it can be not joyful, or we create many associations around food. Is it nice? Is it gross? Is it comfortable? Does it hurt? And we hold on to these feelings. I mean, think about some of the foods that you may like or you may not like. I mean, I grew up in Taiwan and I ate a lot of noodles when I was really little. And to this day, I love noodles and I even love soy sauce. But then I really don't like green peas because I ate a lot of them, mushy green peas, going to school here in London. And I seem to have held on to these feelings and attachments I have, or connections I've created to food. And the same goes for babies and children. So any experiences that they have had around their mouth will create a story and this association with either pleasure or discomfort or being traumatic in their minds, and they will hold on to that in their bodies as well. So for babies who have had to have their mouths held open for medicines, or who've had any tubes or apparatus around their face and their mouth, this could have created an uncomfortable feeling for them that they have held on to, and it's you will see it in terms of them transitioning to food and weaning to foods. So down the road, when there's anything else come to their mouth, their brain will go, or their neurological system takes them into this protective state that we call fight, flight, or fright. And they will then try and flee from that activity or experience related to feeding versus being able to be in a calm, comfortable enough state that they can approach the activity. So the feeding activity in this case. So as an occupational therapist, it's my job to look at how we can create a more pleasurable and comfortable experience for the child around their mouth using sensory integration strategies. And we use sensory strategies to really ground the child's whole body, to settle their bodies, to help them feel more comfortable and to gradually desensitize them to starting with the whole body and then moving up slowly up towards their face and their mouth, and then working inside of their mouth. And for everything we do, we really start with the whole body and move up towards the mouth. And as a parent or as a mum who has also gone through having a lot of feeding difficulties with my son, I remember the first couple of years being really quite traumatic and emotional for me as well. And I know that our how we feel around feeding and different stressful situations can really rub off on our babies and children. They really intuitively know when we are having a difficult time. So I really want to also emphasize that as parents, we need some sort of an emotional support system to help us deal with what we are going through, whether that be through a support group or talking to other parents or finding a professional to help you. And sometimes it's just really helpful to talk to somebody else about these things. So I know this is a discussion about sensory processing, but the way that we feel impacts on our children and how they feel impacts on us, and that can also have a knock-on effect on our sensory processing and motor skills and everything else, as it's all connected. So now let's move on to part 3 about the physical aspects around feeding. Part 3, let's go into the physical and motor aspects and how they support feeding skills. So I have this model over here. My son has helped me to do this one again. I just want to show it to you and give you a little while to see what you think it means. So for any part of development, you need to get stability in one place to then get mobility further away, and then you get more stability which somewhere else, which leads to more mobility, and it's really an ongoing, constant process. So what do I mean by stability? Most people will say we need motor skills for stability, which is totally true. And I'm going to add that we also need to have sensory awareness of our bodies and where we are in order to feel really ready, and that we also need emotional stability to feel safe and secure. So for stability, we have sensory stability, motor stability, and emotional stability. So what do I mean by mobility? Usually by mobility, we mean being able to do skills like rolling, sitting, crawling, walking, and you're using parts of your body that are further away from your center. So being able to use your hands, your mouth, your eyes, your feet to move and play with objects or feed yourself and to eat. So as a baby develops the strength in their core muscles, they can then, for example, move their shoulders more. As they develop strength in their core muscles and in their shoulders, they then get more coordination in their arms to reach for objects and hold and manipulate things. And then as they get more strength and stability in their core, their shoulders, and further down to their wrists, they're then able to use their fingers for more refined fine motor activities. And the same really goes for feeding. As you have stability in your core muscles and in your neck, you then develop more strength and coordination in your jaws. As you get more stability in your jaws, you have more coordination in your cheeks and in your lips. And then as you get more stability in your jaws, your cheeks and your lips, you're able to move the insides of your mouth or manipulate food inside of your mouth more. So we can see how it is a continuing, ongoing process for stability to create more mobility and coordination. And there are two ways of addressing this, as we need both short-term solutions and long-term solutions. We can use a bottom-up approach or a top-down approach. And when we talk about using a bottom-up approach, we are working from the foundational skills and developing the skills that the child needs for that activity. So we might be working on building their strength, their core stability, their stamina, their sensory processing, their body and spatial awareness, and the coordination of the structures in their mouth. And also their sensory comfort and tolerance for different textures and foods. And you may be doing this with the support of a physical therapist or a physiotherapist, occupational therapist, or a speech and feeding therapist. Your speech or feeding therapist may work a little bit more closely on their oral motor skills for feeding to get more stability with their feeding muscle structures. And the Talk Tools, for example, is one of the more common approaches for children with Down syndrome who have oral motor difficulties. And then we can look at using a top-down approach. And this is an approach where we are going to try and create the stability through either equipment, positioning, or your handling techniques with the child. So Positioning and handling should really be demonstrated by your individual therapist. But I'm going to go through some quick positioning tips for feeding. I'm going to just assume your child has a safe swallow, and if you are not sure, you need to see a feeding therapist or a consultant to get this checked out a little bit more. Also, I always think that if a child is resisting an activity or not wanting to eat or feed, this is their way of communicating to us or telling us that they are not comfortable enough to do that activity. So if they are avoiding lumps in their food, something is not comfortable with either their sensory processing or the oral motor skills that they need to manage those lumps, or because of some, whether it be emotional discomfort or trauma that they have had earlier on in their lives, or something medical going on. So we need to figure that out. So just something to keep in mind, that a lack of oral motor skills and stability in the body can also be a contributing reason for food refusal. So food refusal is not that a child is being difficult or that they're being a pain. It's more that they are really communicating something important to us. Let's talk about some positioning tips. And before I go into this, I want to have you do a quick little activity with me. I want you to sit up tall, and I want you to kind of keep your neck a bit long and to tuck your chin a little bit, and just have a swallow and notice how that feels to you. Okay, now I want you to sort of sit a bit slouched and crane your neck back like this, and now try and swallow. And notice how that feels to you. Was one way easier or more difficult for you? Yeah, for me it was definitely much harder to swallow with my neck or bent like this than it was while sitting up tall with my chin tucked like this. And what happens is when go back to my diagram over here, is that here we have the esophagus where the food goes down, and then we have here is your windpipe, and here there is a little valve that opens and closes, and when you're eating, that valve will close so the food doesn't go down your windpipe, and when you're breathing and talking, that valve will open. So when your neck is in this position, that valve is more likely to open, and when your chin is in this tucked position, that it keeps that valve more closed for feeding. So this is really important when positioning, that you want your child to be sitting upright. They will need some back support. If they don't have head control, they're going to need something to help support their head and their neck so that they can have this light chin tuck. So if your child has more complex needs, it's really important that you speak to your NHS therapist about seating equipment and positioning for feeding and what they can do to help you with that. And then also you need to look at your position related to your child. So you need to be sitting at a level where you are eye to eye, because if you are sitting above them, they're going to be doing this to be getting the food from you. So you need to be at this level so that they can still keep that nice chin tuck. And you want their hips to really be to the back of the seat. When they're sitting, you want the tray to be at their elbows level. And if your child is a baby and their knees are not yet at the edge of the seat, they don't really need a footrest, but once their knees do reach the edge of the seat, it's really important to have a foot support for them. And when they are sitting in their chair, you're going to have, your hips are at 90 degrees, your knees are at 90 degrees, and then the feet are also at 90 degrees. So you want to be well supported for feeding. And if you need extra help to position your child, you can use rolled up towels. You can use pool noodles to put on their sides. And I'll usually roll up little towels and put them on the sides over here of them in their chair to keep them secure and stable. Or you may also need something on the sides of their legs to the edge of the chair as well. And sometimes I will use a non-slip mat, like some people use in their cupboards or underneath rugs. You can find them in the dollar or pound shop. So it's so you can use a non-slip mat under their bottom so they don't slide down like this. Personally, I love Trip Trap and Stocky chairs. It's what I've used for my child as well, and we still use it today. So in summary, we want to create and develop stability for more mobility. And now that we've talked about the physical aspects, let's move on to the sensory aspects. Please go to video 2 for part 4 and 5 of this talk on sensory processing and feeding.